It's Dave Dusek. He's a senior writer for Golfweek. We've been friends for forever. And David, you're the first person I texted because we wanted to get your thoughts on this. So the timing, because it did seem like there were a lot of PGA golfers that were legitimately surprised that the tour did a 180 and is now teaming up with LIV.
It's shocking. I mean, about 48 hours ago, we were in Dublin, Ohio. It was Memorial Tournament. Jack Nicklaus is there, and Scotty Scheffler is in contention. You got Rory McIlroy in the last group. There's a lot of big name people, and none of this was being discussed. This was absolutely off the radar. I would speculate that there were probably less than a dozen people globally that knew that this was coming. It's in many ways, it's impressive that this was held so tightly to the vest by so many people. If you get an announcement like this, usually there are leaks. We get a little sense that something like this is coming. None of that was happening. Most of the PGA Tour, well, I should say probably every PGA Tour player found out about this simultaneously with us in the media. I got, this 3-page release from the DP World Tour, the PGA Tour, and the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia at 10 o'clock exactly Eastern time. That's when the players on the PGA Tour who were up at the Canadian Open, that's when they found out. So it was shocking to everybody. There has been a lot of bad blood, a lot of animosity going back and forth, a lot going back and forth on social media between players on either side of this. And I think that we had a sense that eventually some kind of resolution would probably take place. We had no sense that this was coming today, and basically that a merger was how we're going to eventually end this thing.
David, so I know when they joined forces, or actually when they split apart, a lot of people said, oh, eventually they might merge together. Why now? It seems like I thought it was going to happen at some point down the road, but this seems kind of quick. Obviously, we're not getting all the details on this. We're only getting bits and blabs, and we'll find out a lot more later on. My suspicion would be that as many of the legal cases against the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia were going against them, that there was the fear that they may have to open up some of the books, that they may have to share some emails, that they may have to share how they operate and do business with the U.S. legal system because of some of the cases that the PGA Tour were bringing against them. That was the motivating factor starting, the last couple of months to say, we need to get some kind of a deal or an arrangement done now. If this ends up getting to court, if this ends up getting into the U.S. legal system, and we have to give over documentation that they obviously don't want to share, then that's all the motivation that they needed. Now the motivation ends up being on the PGA Tour. And you have to wonder how many Brinks trucks and aircraft carriers worth of cash are floating right now to Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, and PGA Tour headquarters, because the rhetoric that's been going on from the tour for the last year and a half to 2 years with everything with regard to LIV, there's none of this was being telegraphed. Like, hey, you know what? We actually want to start a dialogue and get some discussions on how we could eventually reach an end game. None of that stuff was going on. So somewhere along the lines, and it sounds like Jay Monahan went to London, had a meeting, a breakfast, and then played some golf with the highest ranking people at the Public Investment Fund, which basically runs LIV, and they worked out a deal without the knowledge of the players, without the knowledge of Tiger Woods or Rory McIlroy or any of the people that are on the different groups that really head the PGA Tour, and went ahead and just plowed this thing through. And that's why I think we're getting it now, is that the sides started to get motivated to get this thing done.
David Dusek is joining us. He's a senior writer for Golfweek. The aircraft carriers worth of cash, the Saudis charming Jay Monahan, like all of this, David, it almost makes it feel a little bit worse, like a little bit more gross, because it was Jay Monahan who, was using a moral high ground here to try to get public sentiment and the players on the PGA on his side. How are we supposed to reconcile that today?
I don't know. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I think that is the single biggest challenge that Jay Monahan and the PGA Tour have right now, is the optics of this to the players who were loyal to the PGA Tour. There was a massive meeting that took place amongst the star players. Tiger Woods got on his jet and flew up to Delaware last August and had a meeting with about the top 25 or 30 players on the PGA Tour, every one of whom had been offered cash by LIV, and all of them had turned it down. They worked with the tour to restructure it. We're going to have a set number of off-season stuff. We're going to have these elevated events, and we all to a man are going to be there. We're going to promise to bring you the biggest stars more often, all these things that you're looking for, all the things the sponsors are looking for. We're going to do all that. And now he shattered that. All of that stuff just goes by the wayside. If you're somebody now like a Phil Mickelson or Brooks Koepka or Bryson DeChambeau, who got hundreds of millions of dollars of guaranteed money, plus you get a chance to play no cut, guarantee money events at a higher purse than the PGA Tour events. Those guys are sitting, they get to keep their money. The people who were loyal to Monahan and the PGA Tour, so far as we know right now, they get nothing except that, hey, thanks for being loyal to the tour. How do you look those guys in the eye and say, you know what, this is the better deal for us. This is the better deal for you. This is the better deal for our fans, is that all of a sudden we don't honor your loyalty? That's crazy.
Well, David, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit. Say you're Rory McIlroy. You could say, I never wanted that Saudi money, but now, and I don't know what the deal is going to be moving forward, but now you're going to get that Saudi money. So Rory's going to make, aren't these guys going to be in the long run maybe made whole by this merger?
I get the idea that what you're saying, but I don't. I think that in some cases, not every case, but in a couple of these cases, there's enough animosity, there's enough bad blood where they're not going to be happy for a while. Eventually, are we going to get there? Yeah, we probably will. But the first time that Rory McIlroy has to tee it up next to Patrick Reed at some tournament that is this, what we haven't even named what this entity is going to be yet. Whatever this merged thing becomes, let's say it's sometime they're playing at Riviera, out in California next January or February, and all of a sudden players who had been banned from playing PGA Tour events, they had been, put on suspensions. They're part of this workings now is that they're going to be able to reapply for PGA Tour status. They're going to be able to get their cards back again and get back in the good graces and be able to pop back and forth between live events, PGA Tour events, European and Asian events on the DP World Tour. That's everything that they wanted. How do these guys then feel, the ones who stuck around, the Max Homas of the world, the Colin Morikawas, the Justin Thomases of the world, who turned down all that money? And then they see these guys doing exactly what they wanted to do, exactly how they wanted it to play out. It's going to be really, really touchy, I think, for a while.
But won't those guys all get that Saudi money now? Because it's all going to be one entity. Won't Colin Morikawa be taking money directly from the Saudis at some point very soon?
So the difference is that a lot of this, the money that the live players got was all guaranteed. Now there was prize money in addition when they played in their events, but a lot of players took a look at this and were like, look, part of our sport is that if you play well, you get rewarded. If you don't play well enough, you miss the cut, you get zero. They saw guys, for example, like Koepka and Mickelson and Bubba Watson get all this upfront money. And yes, technically, we've got to see exactly how some of this stuff on whatever this new tour is going to be. The Public Investment Fund has said that they're going to plow in a lot of money, but there will still be sponsors. You're still going to see, for example, like Travelers be involved up in the tournament in Hartford. You're still going to see Workplace, Workday being involved at the tournament at Memorial, like all those things in addition to. So we don't really know if Colin Morikawa, for example, is going to get money directly from the Saudis, but the prize money injections that were going to come probably will have some Saudi money washed into it.
David Dusek, senior writer for Golfweek, is joining us here on Maggie and Perloff. Talk about the big news, live in the PGA Tour now under one umbrella and basically being backed by the Saudi Arabian royal government, the Public Investment Fund. David, I thought what was kind of fascinating about this story is that, to me, and again, I'm an outsider, I'm a casual, if you will, when it comes to golf, but it didn't seem like LIV was working. They weren't putting out the TV ratings anymore. Nobody seemed to like the team aspect to it, the four aces, the cliques, the crushers. I don't even think your most diehard sports fan would have any clue if I asked them on the street and said, are you rooting for the Fireballs? They would have no clue what I'm talking about. LIV wasn't even working. How did they get in a position of power when it didn't seem like the tour was really catching on?
No, I think it's a pretty astute observation. Nobody was ever talking about the golf. Everybody's talking about the controversy. People are talking about the money. People are talking about defections from the PGA Tour and some of the European Tour players to LIV. That stuff made news. Who won, in Oklahoma City? Nobody cared. When they signed a weird sort of TV arrangement, nobody seemed to care. The threat, if you will, always was that they were just going to slowly sit there and cipher off player after player, and it was going to be this very odd competition for the PGA Tour. And the tour said that people are free to go, but you can't have it both ways. The way that the business model had been established, they needed the PGA Tour players to play on the PGA Tour. The PGA Tour now has changed its business model, not just with this new arrangement, but it's gone from a not-for-profit organization to a for-profit organization. They have changed the physical business model of the PGA Tour as part of this accommodation. So that is going to change. That means that the marketing, if you will, the name, image, and likeness deals with players, like all the different marketing stuff that goes on, which is tens of millions of dollars every single week at each of the event, these all change. So in many ways, there were different competing models, and everybody ended up having to get their seat at the trough, for lack of a better words. And once they did that, then the PGA Tour obviously acquiesced, and we're sort of in the position we're in now.
David, do you think there's a time in the future where this new organization or the Saudi Arabians get their foot into the four majors, or are the majors always going to be separate?
Well, I think the majors are probably going to be separate. And for the biggest reason for that is that the PGA Tour doesn't actually run any of them. The Augusta National Golf Club runs the Masters. The USGA, which is the governing body of golf in the United States and in Mexico, runs the U.S. Open, which we're going to be out there next week at the LA Country Club. And boy, won't that be an interesting time now. The PGA of America runs the PGA Championship, and the RNA runs the British Open. So those are run by totally separate organizations. They don't need the marketing. Certainly Augusta National, for all the people who have never been there, there is no signage. There is no hospitality area. They could care less about the money. It's the only sporting event I've ever been to or covered where money has nothing to do with it. So I think the majors get to sort of keep themselves off to the side. It's the week-to-week stuff that you see, on television, that's going to be the stuff where this is going to play out really starting in 2024.
David, last one, and I'll keep it kind of open-ended for you. Anything else you think our audience should know about what happened today for golf fans, about, anything else that we may have missed that we should know about?
I would love to have some really cool, insightful story for you, but I think that right now, what the major thing that everybody should be aware of is that this is such an abrupt change of direction for the PGA Tour. We don't have all the details at this point. I think it's going to be a couple weeks. If you listen to what Jay Monahan has been saying to a couple outlets where he's spoken today, a couple weeks, we're going to have more of the details and more of how these things are going to get worked out. It's literally as if all of a sudden the Canadian Football League, the NFL, and the XFL all smashed and merged into one, and we're going to start to just play that in September. It's absolutely out of left field, nuts. For those of us who cover this every week, we had no idea it was happening. And we'll see how the details all pan out. The other interesting thing that we didn't actually talk about real quick, the 9/11 families who've been adamantly against the LIV Tour and everything that it stands for. I don't know how Monahan and everybody else also talks to them and looks them in the eye today, saying that this is actually a good thing when you have been picketing outside events and trying to raise awareness about where this money for the LIV Tour comes from. And now we're basically creating one gigantic organization for men's golf globally. And the people behind 9/11 are going to be the ones that are funding it.
David, can't tell you how much we appreciate this today. We know it's a busy day. David Dusek, he's a senior writer for Golfweek. Good friend. Thank you, David. We'll talk to you again soon.
You got it, guys. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate that.